Before we dive into the story, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 at the end. Now, let's begin. Rain hammered the pavement in sheets, turning the city streets into rivers of neon reflections. Madison Hayes gripped the handlebars of her delivery bike, squinting through the downpour as her phone's GPS blinked erratically in the waterproof pouch strapped to her wrist. The order was simple. 1 large pepperoni pizza, extra cheese, delivered to apartment 4B at the Riverside Towers. Nothing fancy, just another gig in a long night of endless deliveries. Her sneakers were soaked through, her jacket clinging to her shoulders like a second skin, and her fingers had gone numb an hour ago. But Madison didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. Rent was due in 3 days, her younger brother's tuition payment loomed next week, and her beat-up bike was 1 flat tire away from retirement. So she pedaled harder, ignoring the ache in her calves and the sting of rain on her cheeks. Riverside Towers wasn't the shiny penthouse district, but it wasn't a slum either. Just a mid-range building where people lived paycheck to paycheck, much like her. She locked her bike to a rusted railing and jogged inside, pizza box balanced carefully in one hand. The elevator groaned as it carried her to the 4th floor, fluorescent lights flickering overhead. When she reached 4B, she knocked twice, shaking water from her hair. The door swung open, and Madison's breath caught. The man standing there looked like he'd just rolled out of bed, or maybe a glamour magazine. Messy dark hair, sharp jawline, eyes the color of storm clouds, and a plain gray t-shirt that somehow looked expensive. But what struck her most was the apartment behind him. Bare walls, a single fold-out chair, an air mattress on the floor, and a cardboard box serving as a table. He's broke, Madison thought instantly. Really, really broke. Pizza delivery, she said, forcing a smile despite her chattering teeth. He nodded, pulling out a worn leather wallet. She noticed the scuffed edges, the way he hesitated before extracting a $20 bill. The pizza cost $18.50. When she handed him his change, a crumpled $1.02, he held it out to her. Keep it as a tip. Madison looked at the sad little pile of coins and shook her head. No, thanks. You keep it. His brow furrowed, confusion flickering across his face. It's your tip. And you look like you need it more than I do, she replied gently, nodding toward the empty apartment behind him. Seriously, it's okay. For a long moment, he simply stared at her, those gray eyes searching hers as if trying to solve a puzzle. Then, slowly, his lips curved into the faintest smile. You're the first delivery person who's ever refused a tip. Madison shrugged, already turning toward the stairs. First time for everything. Stay dry, okay? She didn't wait for a response, jogging back down the steps and into the rain. But as she pedaled away, she couldn't shake the image of those storm-gray eyes and that almost smile. Something about him lingered, like a song she couldn't quite place. What Madison didn't know was that the man in apartment 4B wasn't broke at all. His name was Alexander Kane, and he was the youngest billionaire in the city, founder of Kane Enterprises, a tech empire valued at over $12 billion. The bare apartment was temporary, a self-imposed experiment in minimalism while his penthouse underwent renovations, and the girl who just refused his tip had done something no one in his world ever did. She'd treated him like he was human, not a walking checkbook. Alexander stood in the doorway long after she'd disappeared, the crumpled $1.02 still in his hand. Then he laughed softly, shaking his head. Interesting, he murmured to himself. Very interesting. 2 nights later, Madison was back on her bike, weaving through traffic with a bag of Thai takeout strapped to her back. Her phone buzzed with a new order. Same address. Riverside Towers, apartment 4B. She blinked at the screen. Same guy? Again? When she knocked on the door, Alexander opened it with that same unreadable expression. This time, he wore a faded Columbia University hoodie and jeans with a hole in one knee. "Pizza again?" Madison asked, holding up the bag. "Thai food this time." Trying to diversify, he replied deadpan. She handed over the bag, and once again, he offered a tip. $5 this time. Once again, Madison refused. "Seriously, keep it. Buy yourself a chair or something." Alexander tilted his head, studying her. "Why do you keep refusing?" "Because you clearly need it more than I do," she said simply. "I've got a job." "You? Well, you've got an air mattress. And that bothers you?" Madison shrugged. "I just don't think it's right to take money from someone who's struggling." His eyes softened. "Just a fraction." "What's your name?" "Madison. Madison Hayes." "Well, Madison Hayes," he said slowly, as if tasting the syllables. "You're either the kindest person I've met or the most stubborn." She grinned. "Can't I be both?" Before he could answer, she was gone again, her laughter echoing in the stairwell. That night, Alexander sat on his air mattress, staring at the Thai food container. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Daniel, I need a favor. Find out everything you can about a delivery driver named Madison Hayes." On the other end, his assistant sighed. "Boss, are you seriously running a background check on a food delivery person?" "Just do it," Alexander said, but his tone was lighter than usual. "And Daniel, don't let her know." By the end of the week, Alexander had ordered food 5 more times. Each time, Madison showed up, rain or shine, always refusing his tips with that same gentle stubbornness. And each time, he found himself looking forward to those brief moments at the door, the way she smiled even when exhausted, the way she treated him like a regular person instead of a project to pity or a celebrity to fawn over. On the 7th delivery, Madison arrived to find Alexander sitting on the building's front steps, looking unusually pensive. "Locked out?" she asked, holding up a bag of burgers. He glanced up, and for the first time she saw something vulnerable in his expression. "No. Just thinking." "About what?" "About how someone can work this hard and still smile." Madison sat down beside him, uninvited but not unwelcome. "You think I'm smiling because I love delivering food in the rain? Aren't you?" She laughed, shaking her head. "No. I'm smiling because if I don't, I'll cry. And crying doesn't pay the rent." Alexander turned to face her fully. "Why do you do this?" "The delivery job, I mean. Because my little brother's in college, my mom's medical bills aren't going to pay themselves, and I'm 1 semester away from finishing my business degree. So I deliver food. I smile, and I keep going." She met his gaze, unflinching. "What about you? Why are you living in an empty apartment with an air mattress?" He hesitated, then decided on a version of the truth. "Because I wanted to see what it's like to live without all the excess. To remember what matters." Madison nodded slowly. "And? What have you learned?" Alexander looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something startling, that the most valuable things can't be bought. For a moment, they sat in silence, rain pattering softly around them. Then Madison stood, brushing off her jeans. "Your burgers are getting cold." He took the bag but didn't go inside. Instead, he pulled out his wallet and held out a 20. "Please, take it this time." Madison shook her head, smiling. "Sorry, mystery guy. My policy hasn't changed. Why are you so stubborn? Why do you keep trying to tip someone who clearly won't take it?" She countered, eyes sparkling with challenge. Alexander laughed, a real, full laugh that surprised them both. "Because you're the first person in years who's made me feel like I'm worth more than my bank account." Madison froze, her teasing smile fading into something softer. Everyone's worth more than their bank account. She touched his shoulder briefly, a fleeting gesture that sent warmth radiating through him. even broke guys living in empty apartments. Then she was on her bike, pedaling into the night, leaving Alexander standing in the rain with a bag of cold burgers and a heart that felt strangely, impossibly full. That night, he made another call. "Daniel, I need you to do something for me." And no, I'm not explaining why. Madison didn't expect to see Alexander again outside of food deliveries, but fate, as it turned out, had a wicked sense of humor. She was sitting in the campus library, buried under a mountain of textbooks, trying to finish a business strategy assignment when a shadow fell across her table. "Is this seat taken?" Madison looked up, and her pen clattered to the floor. Alexander stood there, wearing a tailored navy suit this time, looking every inch the successful professional. Gone was the hole-ridden jeans and faded hoodie. This version of him was polished, commanding, and utterly out of place in the fluorescent-lit library. "What are you doing here?" She blurted, half rising from her chair. "I'm auditing a class," he said smoothly, pulling out the chair across from her without waiting for permission. "Business strategy. Figured I'd brush up on theory." Madison's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "You just happen to be auditing a class at my university?" "Coincidence is a beautiful thing," he replied, lips quirking. She didn't believe him for a second, but something in his expression made her sit back down. "You clean up well," she said finally. "So do you." He nodded at her neat ponytail and the coffee-stained sweater she'd thrown on that morning. Though I preferred the soaking wet, defiant delivery driver look, Madison snorted, biting back a smile. "Flattery will get you nowhere." "Good thing I'm not trying to flatter you then." They studied in companionable silence after that, though Madison found herself glancing up every few minutes, catching him doing the same. It was unnerving and strangely comfortable all at once. When she finally packed up her books 2 hours later, Alexander walked her to the parking lot. Her bike was chained to a rusted rack, and she noticed him frowning at it. "That thing looks like it's one ride away from falling apart," he observed. "It's gotten me this far," Madison said defensively. "Besides, bikes don't judge you for being poor. Neither do I." His voice was quiet, sincere. Madison looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered who this man was beneath the mysterious exterior. "Why are you really here, Alexander?" "Because I wanted to see you," he admitted. "And because ordering food 7 times a week just to talk to you for 3 minutes seemed excessive." Her heart did a strange little flip. "You've been ordering food just to see me? Is that so hard to believe?" Madison opened her mouth, closed it, then laughed helplessly. "Yes, actually. I'm a delivery driver with grease stains on my jacket and a bike held together by duct tape. You're," she gestured at his suit, "you're whatever this is. This," he said, stepping closer, "is just packaging. You, Madison Hayes, are the first person in a very long time who's seen past packaging to what's underneath." "And what's underneath?" she challenged, though her voice had gone soft. "Someone who's tired of being treated like a wallet with legs," he said. "Someone who wants to know what it's like to be seen as just a man." Madison swallowed hard, her pulse racing. "You're not just some broke guy living in an empty apartment, are you?" Alexander hesitated, then shook his head slowly. "No, I'm not." "Then who are you?" "Someone who'll tell you everything," he said, "if you give me a chance." She should have walked away. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous, that men who appeared out of nowhere and said pretty words were trouble. But something in his eyes, those storm-gray eyes that looked at her like she was a mystery worth solving, made her pause. "1 coffee," she said finally. "You get 1 coffee to explain yourself." Alexander's face broke into a grin so bright it could have powered the city. 1 coffee. Deal. 20 minutes later, they sat across from each other in a small cafe near campus. Madison cradled a mug of cheap drip coffee while Alexander stirred a black espresso absently. "My full name is Alexander Kane," he began, and Madison's eyes widened. "As in Kane Enterprises? The tech billionaire Alexander Kane?" He nodded, watching her carefully for a reaction. "That's me." Madison set down her mug with a thud. "You let me feel sorry for you. You let me refuse tips because I thought you were struggling." "You refused tips because you have a good heart," Alexander corrected. "I didn't manipulate that. I was just living quietly for a while. In an empty apartment with an air mattress," Madison said flatly. "While your penthouse gets renovated, I'm guessing?" "Something like that." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "But here's the thing, Madison. Every interaction we've had, every conversation, you've treated me like a person. Not a billionaire, not a businessman, not someone to impress or use. Just a guy who ordered too much takeout. Do you know how rare that is?" Madison bit her lip, her mind spinning. "So this whole time, you've been testing me?" "No," Alexander said firmly. "I've been getting to know the most genuine person I've met in years. The fact that you didn't know who I was just made it easier to be myself." She wanted to be angry, but the sincerity in his voice disarmed her. "Why tell me now?" "Because I don't want to lie to you. And because," he hesitated, something vulnerable flickering across his features, "because I'd like to keep seeing you. As myself this time." Madison laughed, shaking her head in disbelief. "This is insane. You're insane." "Probably," Alexander agreed. "But I'm also serious. Have dinner with me. A real dinner, not through a delivery bag." "I don't date billionaires," Madison said, though her resolve was crumbling. "Good. Because I don't want you to date a billionaire. I want you to date me. Alexander, the guy who thinks your stubbornness is charming and your smile could light up the darkest room." Damn it, Madison thought. Why does he have to say things like that? She took a long sip of coffee, buying herself time. Finally, she met his gaze. "One dinner, but I'm paying for my half." Alexander's grin returned. "I wouldn't expect anything less." As they left the cafe, Madison's phone buzzed with a new delivery request. She glanced at the address and froze. Riverside Towers, apartment 4B. She looked at Alexander, who had the decency to look sheepish. "Did you seriously just order food right now?" "I might have set a standing order," he admitted, "just in case you said no to dinner." Madison burst out laughing, swatting his arm. "You're ridiculous. And you're extraordinary," he said quietly. For a moment they stood on the sidewalk, the city buzzing around them, and Madison felt the ground shift beneath her feet. This was dangerous. This was reckless. This was probably the worst idea she'd ever had. But when Alexander smiled at her like she was the only person in the world, she couldn't bring herself to walk away. "One dinner," she repeated, more to herself than to him. "One dinner," Alexander agreed. And silently, he thought, the first of many. The restaurant Alexander chose for their first real date wasn't what Madison expected. No Michelin stars, no chandeliers, no waiters in bow ties hovering like anxious penguins. Instead, he took her to a small Italian place tucked into a side street, the kind with checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in wine bottles. "This is your idea of a billionaire date?" Madison teased as they slid into a corner booth. "I was expecting champagne and caviar. Would you have preferred that?" Alexander asked, genuinely curious. "God, no," she admitted with a laugh. "I wouldn't even know which fork to use." "Then this is perfect." He handed her a menu, his fingers brushing hers briefly. "Besides, I have a theory that the best Italian food comes from places where the owner yells at you if you don't finish your plate." As if on cue, an elderly woman emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a flour-dusted apron. Her eyes landed on Alexander, and her face split into a wide grin. Alexander. My boy, you finally bring a girl. Sit, I bring you the good stuff. Madison raised an eyebrow as the woman disappeared back into the kitchen. My boy? I've been coming here since college, Alexander explained, looking almost embarrassed. Maria's like a second mother. She doesn't care that I run a company. She just cares that I eat. I think I like Maria, Madison said, grinning. Dinner was a revelation. They talked about everything and nothing. Her dreams of opening her own business someday. His early struggles building Kane Enterprises from a dorm room startup. Her little brother's terrible taste in girlfriends. His sister Emily's relentless matchmaking attempts. Wait, Madison said, nearly choking on her pasta. Your sister tried to set you up with her yoga instructor? Twice, Alexander confirmed, grimacing. The second time, she literally showed up at my office. And I hid in the supply closet until she left. Madison dissolved into laughter, and Alexander watched her with undisguised warmth. What? She asked, catching his stare. Nothing. I just like the way you laugh. Like you mean it. Her cheeks warmed. You say things like that a lot, you know. Things like what? Things that make it hard to remember why I should be careful around you. Alexander's expression grew serious. You should be careful around me, Madison. My world isn't easy. There's press, expectations, people who'll judge you just for being seen with me. Are you trying to scare me off? I'm trying to be honest. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. But I'm also hoping you'll think I'm worth the risk. Madison stared at their joined hands, her heart hammering. Everything about this was too fast, too intense, too much. But when she looked into those storm-gray eyes, she saw something that made her want to be brave. One step at a time, she said finally. We'll see where this goes. Relief flooded Alexander's face. One step at a time. I can do that. Maria returned then, depositing 2 plates of tiramisu in front of them and pinching Alexander's cheek like he was 12. You keep this one, she told him, gesturing at Madison. She has good eyes. Honest eyes. After Maria swept away, Madison grinned. I like her more and more. The rest of the evening passed in a comfortable blur of conversation and stolen glances. When Alexander finally walked her back to her bike, the city had quieted, streetlights casting pools of gold on the damp pavement. Thank you for tonight, Madison said, unlocking her bike. For being honest. For all of it. Thank you for giving me a chance, Alexander replied. He hesitated, then leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. Get home safe, Madison Hayes. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and pedaled away into the night. But this time, when she glanced back, he was still standing there, watching her go with a smile that made her heart skip. Over the next few weeks, their lives began to intertwine in unexpected ways. Alexander started appearing at her deliveries, coincidentally ordering food whenever her shift started. Madison would roll her eyes and shove the takeout bag at him, but she couldn't suppress her smile. He invited her to coffee between her classes, and she found herself saying yes more often than no. They explored hidden corners of the city, bookstores where the shelves groaned under the weight of forgotten stories, parks where they could sit on damp benches and watch the world go by, food trucks where Alexander insisted on trying everything at least once. You're going to get food poisoning, Madison warned as he bit into a questionable-looking taco. Worth it, he mumbled through a mouthful. This is amazing. She laughed, shaking her head. You're such a weirdo. And yet, you keep showing up, he pointed out, grinning. Yeah, she admitted softly. I do. But not everything was light-hearted. One evening, as they sat in Alexander's now furnished apartment, he'd finally bought actual furniture, Madison noticed a stack of newspapers on the coffee table. The headlines screamed about Kane Enterprises' latest acquisition, accompanied by photos of Alexander in sharp suits, looking every inch the ruthless CEO. "Is that who you are?" she asked, nodding at the papers. "When you're not eating questionable tacos with me?" Alexander followed her gaze and sighed. That's the version of me the world sees. Cold, calculating, always 3 steps ahead. And what's the truth? The truth is that version exists because it has to. Running a company worth billions means making hard decisions. Sometimes I have to be ruthless. But that's not all I am. He turned to face her fully. With you, I get to be the version of me I actually like. Madison's chest tightened. What if I can't handle both versions? Then I'll understand, Alexander said quietly, but I'm hoping you'll give me a chance to prove I'm more than a headline. She reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. 1 step at a time. Remember? He smiled, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. 1 step at a time. That night, after Madison left, Alexander stood at his window, staring out at the city lights. His phone buzzed with a message from his assistant Daniel. "Boss, the press is starting to notice you're spending time with someone. What do you want me to do?" Alexander typed back quickly. "Nothing. Let them notice." He pocketed the phone and smiled to himself. Madison Hayes had crashed into his carefully controlled world like a storm, and he had no intention of letting her go. The first time Madison saw Alexander in full CEO mode, it was like watching a different person inhabit his body. She'd agreed to meet him for lunch downtown, and when she arrived at the towering glass monolith that housed Kane Enterprises, she felt suddenly, painfully out of place in her delivery jacket and worn jeans. The lobby was all sleek marble and minimalist art, employees moving briskly in tailored suits. A receptionist eyed Madison with thinly veiled suspicion until Alexander appeared, striding across the lobby with his phone pressed to his ear. "Cancel the 2 o'clock, he said crisply into the phone. "And tell Patterson if he doesn't have revised projections by end of day, he can find another investor." He ended the call and turned to Madison, his expression softening instantly. "Hey. You made it. I feel like I should have dressed up," Madison said, glancing around nervously. "You're perfect," Alexander said simply, taking her hand. Several employees did double takes as Alexander led her to the elevator, their whispers following like a ripple. Madison tried to ignore them, but her discomfort must have shown because Alexander squeezed her hand. Ignore them. They're just curious. Curious about why a billionaire CEO is holding hands with someone who smells like pizza? Alexander laughed. Curious about who finally got me to smile at work. His office was on the top floor, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Madison walked to the glass, pressing her palm against it. "I delivered food to a building across the street once," she murmured. "Never imagined I'd be standing here." "Life's funny that way," Alexander said, coming to stand beside her. Lunch was delivered, ironically, by a different delivery service, and they ate at his desk, surrounded by contracts and financial reports. Madison picked up one of the documents curiously. "Do you actually understand all this?" "Most of it," Alexander admitted. "The parts I don't, I have very expensive lawyers to explain." She set the paper down, studying him. "Do you ever miss it? The simplicity of that empty apartment?" Alexander considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. But then I remember what I'm building here isn't just for me. It's for the people who work for me, the communities we invest in, the future I want to create." He met her eyes. "And lately, it's for the possibility of sharing it with someone who sees beyond the dollar signs." Madison's breath caught. Before she could respond, the office door burst open, and a whirlwind in designer heels swept in. "Alexander Kane, you have been avoiding my calls for 3 weeks and I—" The woman stopped mid-sentence, her sharp eyes landing on Madison. "Oh, you're real. Emily, Alexander said with a mix of exasperation and affection. "This is Madison. Madison, my sister, Emily." Emily was stunning in that effortless way wealthy people often were. Perfectly highlighted hair, immaculate makeup, a dress that probably cost more than Madison's rent. But her smile, when it came, was genuine. "So you're the delivery driver who has my brother ordering takeout like a college student again." She extended a manicured hand. "I've been dying to meet you." Madison shook her hand, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "Nice to meet you too." Emily circled Madison like a friendly but curious cat. "I have to say, you're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Madison asked, half amused, half defensive. "Someone more polished, I suppose. Alex usually goes for the corporate types, all sharp suits and sharper ambitions." Emily's gaze softened. "But I can see why he likes you. You look at him like he's a person, not a portfolio." "He is a person," Madison said simply. Emily's smile widened. "Oh, I like her. You're keeping this one, Alex." "That's the plan," Alexander said, his hand finding Madison's again. After Emily left, promising to invite them to dinner soon and threatening bodily harm if Alexander didn't answer her calls, Madison sagged against Alexander's desk. "Your sister is intense." "She means well," Alexander said, wrapping his arms around Madison's waist from behind. "And she's right. You know. You do look at me differently than anyone else." Madison leaned back into his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "How do I look at you?" "Like I'm worth more than my net worth." His voice was quiet against her ear. She turned in his arms, meeting his gaze. "You are worth more than your net worth, Alexander Kane. You're worth the way you make terrible decisions about street food, the way you laugh when you think no one's listening, the way you treat a broke delivery driver like she matters." "You do matter," he said fiercely. "You matter more than you know." Then he kissed her, soft and searching, and Madison felt the world tilt on its axis. It was their first real kiss, and it tasted like possibility and risk and everything she'd been too afraid to want. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Madison whispered, "This is really happening, isn't it?" "If you'll let it," Alexander replied. She nodded, her heart racing. "One step at a time." "One step at a time," he agreed, smiling against her lips. But as Madison left Kane Enterprises that afternoon, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just crossed some invisible threshold. This wasn't just a casual thing anymore. This was real, complicated, and potentially heartbreaking. That night, as she lay in her cramped apartment, her phone buzzed with a message from Alexander. "Thinking about you. Sleep well, Madison Hayes." She typed back, "Thinking about you too. Good night, billionaire boy." Then she turned off her light and stared at the ceiling, smiling like an idiot. Across the city, Alexander did the same, his mind full of a stubborn, kind-hearted delivery driver who'd somehow become the most important person in his world. Neither of them could have known that their fragile, beautiful beginning was about to face its first real test. The photograph appeared online on a Tuesday morning, and by noon, Madison's phone was ringing non-stop. She'd been in the middle of a delivery when the first call came from her roommate, breathless and frantic. "Madison, have you seen the internet?" "I'm literally on a bike in traffic," Madison replied, swerving around a taxi. "What's going on?" "You're on Celeb Gossip today. With Alexander Kane. There's a photo of you two kissing." Madison nearly crashed into a parked car. She pulled over, hands trembling as she opened her phone's browser. There, splashed across multiple websites, was a photo of her and Alexander outside Kane Enterprises, caught in that moment when he'd kissed her goodbye. The headlines were brutal. Kane Enterprises CEO caught with mystery woman. Alexander Kane's new girlfriend. Who is she? From rags to riches? Delivery driver dating billionaire Alexander Kane. Madison's stomach churned as she read the comments. Some were curious, others cruel, speculating about her motives, her background, whether she was a gold digger or just naive. By the time she finished her shift and made it home, the story had exploded. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from unknown numbers, her social media accounts flooded with friend requests and messages. She sat on her bed, feeling like the walls were closing in. A knock at the door made her jump. She opened it to find Alexander standing there, looking haggard and furious in equal measure. "I'm so sorry," he said immediately. "My security team is trying to trace who took the photo. I'll have my lawyers, Alex." "Slow down," Madison interrupted, pulling him inside. He paced her small living room like a caged animal. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. The press, the scrutiny, they'll dig into every part of your life now. Your family, your friends, your past. Hey," Madison said firmly, catching his arm, "look at me." He stopped, meeting her eyes. "I knew this might happen," she said quietly. "Maybe not this fast, but I knew dating you meant stepping into the spotlight. You don't deserve this," Alexander said, his voice rough. "You deserve privacy, respect, and I also deserve to make my own choices," Madison cut in. "I chose you, Alexander. I chose this, knowing it might get complicated. But the things they're saying about you are just words from strangers who don't know me," she said. "I'm not going to let them scare me away." Alexander pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You're incredible. You know that?" "I'm terrified," she admitted against his chest. "But I'm also stubborn as hell, remember?" He laughed shakily. "How could I forget?" They spent the evening strategizing. Alexander's PR team drafted a brief statement confirming he was in a relationship but requesting privacy. Madison set her social media accounts to private and changed her phone number. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Over the next few days, the media frenzy intensified before gradually dying down. Madison learned to ignore the stares when she made deliveries, the whispers from classmates at university. Alexander's security team implemented protocols. No more public kisses without checking for cameras, planned routes to avoid paparazzi hotspots. But the hardest part came unexpectedly, in the form of a phone call from Madison's mother. Madison Marie Hayes. What on earth is going on? Her mother's voice was equal parts concerned and incredulous. "I saw your picture with some billionaire on the news. Are you in trouble?" "No, Mom. I'm fine," Madison assured her, sinking onto her bed. We're dating." "Dating a billionaire?" "Madison, sweetie, people like that don't date people like us." The word stung more than Madison wanted to admit. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I just don't want you to get hurt, honey. These rich men, they play games. They get bored and move on, and you're left picking up the pieces. Alex isn't like that," Madison said, though doubt crept into her voice. "How do you know? How long have you even known him?" Madison couldn't answer because her mother was right. It had been barely 2 months. Was she being naive? After she hung up, Madison sat in silence, her mother's words echoing. Alexander seemed genuine, but what if this was all just a temporary fascination for him? What if she was setting herself up for the exact heartbreak her mother warned about? Her phone buzzed. "Alexander, dinner at Maria's tomorrow? I promised her I'd bring you back." Madison stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Finally, she typed, "Can we talk? In person?" His reply came instantly. "Of course. I'll come over now. Are you okay?" "I will be. Just need to see you." 20 minutes later, Alexander was at her door, concern etched on his face. "What's wrong?" Madison led him inside and took a breath. "My mom called. She's worried I'm in over my head, that you'll get bored and move on." Madison. And I need you to be honest with me, Alex. Is that a possibility? Am I just a novelty to you? The delivery driver who treated you like a normal guy? Alexander took her hands, his expression pained. Do you really think that? I don't know what to think, she admitted. Your world is so different from mine. What if you wake up one day and realize I don't fit? Then I'd spend every day proving you wrong, Alexander said fiercely. Madison, I'm not with you because you're different from my usual world. I'm with you because when I'm around you, I feel like the best version of myself. You challenge me, you ground me, you make me laugh when I'm drowning in spreadsheets and board meetings. He cupped her face gently. I can't promise the road ahead will be easy. My life comes with complications. But I can promise that I'm all in. Completely, terrifyingly all in. Tears pricked Madison's eyes. I'm scared, Alex. Me too, he admitted. I've never felt this much for someone. It's terrifying. She laughed wetly. We're a pair, aren't we? The best kind, he said, pulling her close. They held each other in the dim light of her apartment, and Madison felt some of her fear ease. This was real. Complicated, and risky, and real, and she was willing to fight for it. 3 months into their relationship, Madison was still adjusting to the strange duality of her life. By day, she was a delivery driver and college student, hustling between classes and gigs. By night, she sometimes found herself at charity galas on Alexander's arm, wearing borrowed dresses and trying not to trip in heels. The contrast was jarring. One evening, Alexander surprised her with an invitation to a Kane Enterprises gala, a major fundraiser for tech education in underserved communities. I want you there, he said over coffee. Not as my arm candy, but as my partner. Your partner who still doesn't know which fork to use, Madison reminded him. The one on the outside, Alexander said with a grin. Work your way in. Madison laughed despite her nerves. Fine, but I'm drawing the line at diamonds. Would cubic zirconia be acceptable? She swatted his arm playfully. The night of the gala, Madison stood in front of her closet in despair. Her roommate, Claire, had pulled every dress she owned, but nothing seemed right. You're overthinking this, Claire said, holding up a simple black dress. This is elegant, classic, and it fits you perfectly. Madison tried it on and had to admit Claire was right. The dress was understated but beautiful, hugging her curves without being ostentatious. She paired it with simple heels and minimal jewelry, a delicate silver necklace Alexander had given her for her birthday. When Alexander picked her up, his reaction was everything she needed. He stared, speechless, for a full 5 seconds before managing. You're stunning. You're not so bad yourself, Madison said, taking in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. The gala was held at a downtown hotel, a glittering affair with hundreds of guests in formal wear. Madison clung to Alexander's arm as they entered, feeling like she'd stepped into a movie. Remember, Alexander murmured as they crossed the threshold. You belong here as much as anyone else. Madison wasn't convinced, but she put on a brave face. The evening was a whirlwind of introductions. Business partners, investors, philanthropists, all watching her with varying degrees of curiosity. Alexander never left her side, his hand a steady presence on her back. But halfway through the night, Madison excused herself to the restroom, needing a moment to breathe. She was washing her hands when 2 women entered, their conversation echoing off the marble walls. Can you believe Alex brought her? A delivery driver? One said, her tone dripping with disbelief. It's obviously a phase, the other replied. Men like Alexander Kane don't end up with girls like that. She's probably just refreshing after all the corporate climbers. Madison's hands froze under the running water. Give it 6 months, the first woman continued. He'll be back to dating models or executives. Someone who actually fits his world. They left without realizing Madison had been in one of the stalls. She stood there, staring at her reflection, their words cutting deeper than she wanted to admit. When she returned to the ballroom, Alexander noticed immediately. What happened? Nothing, Madison lied, forcing a smile. Just needed some air. His eyes narrowed, but before he could press, they were pulled into another conversation with a potential donor. Madison smiled and nodded through the rest of the evening, but the women's words haunted her. Back in the car, Alexander turned to her. Okay, what really happened? Madison hesitated, then sighed. I overheard some women in the bathroom. They think I'm a phase, that you'll get bored and move on to someone who fits your world. Alexander's jaw tightened. Who said that? It doesn't matter. It does to me. Madison touched his arm. Alex, they're not entirely wrong. Look at tonight. I don't fit in that world. I spent half the evening terrified I'd use the wrong fork or say something stupid, and I spent the entire evening proud to have you by my side. Alexander countered. Madison, those people? Their opinions mean nothing. You know what matters? That you have more integrity in your little finger than most of them have in their entire bodies. But what if they're right? Madison's voice cracked. What if one day you realize I'm not enough? Alexander pulled the car over abruptly, turning to face her fully. Listen to me. I don't want someone who fits my world. I want someone who makes my world better. And that's you, Madison. You, with your stubbornness and your big heart, and your terrible taste in pizza toppings. She laughed despite the tears threatening to spill. Pineapple is a perfectly acceptable topping. It's an abomination, Alexander said solemnly. But I love you anyway. Madison froze. What? Alexander's eyes widened as if he hadn't meant to say it. Then his expression softened. I love you, Madison Hayes. I'm in love with you. Completely, irrationally in love with you. Tears spilled down Madison's cheeks. You're insane. Probably, he agreed. Does that change how you feel? No, Madison whispered. Because I love you too. Even though you're a billionaire weirdo who orders too much takeout. Alexander laughed, pulling her into a kiss that tasted like relief and joy and promise. When they finally pulled apart, Madison rested her forehead against his. This is real, isn't it? We're really doing this. We're really doing this. Alexander confirmed. One step at a time, remember? One step at a time, Madison echoed. And for the first time since the photo had surfaced, since the whispers and doubts had started, she truly believed it. They could make this work. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worth having ever was. The next challenge came from an unexpected direction. Madison's younger brother, Tyler, came home for spring break, and she'd been both excited and nervous to introduce him to Alexander. Tyler was fiercely protective of her, and Madison knew he'd have opinions. They met at a casual burger joint, Madison's choice, wanting neutral ground. Tyler arrived first, his college sweatshirt rumpled, backpack slung over one shoulder. He hugged Madison tightly before pulling back to study her face. You look happy, he said suspiciously. Should I be worried? When have I ever made bad decisions? Madison asked innocently. Do you want that list chronologically or by severity? Before Madison could retort, Alexander walked in. Tyler's eyes widened. Holy crap, you weren't kidding. That's actually Alexander Kane. Ty, be cool, Madison hissed. Alexander approached with an easy smile, extending his hand. You must be Tyler. Madison talks about you constantly. Tyler shook his hand, clearly trying to reconcile the billionaire CEO with the guy ordering a double cheeseburger. They settled into a booth, and the first 15 minutes were awkward, Tyler interrogating Alexander with barely concealed suspicion. So, you're dating my sister, the same sister who delivers your food on a bike held together by duct tape. I am, Alexander confirmed. And for the record, I offered to buy her a new bike. She refused. Of course she did, Tyler muttered. She's stubborn like that. It's one of her best qualities, Alexander said, smiling at Madison. Tyler softened slightly. Okay, real talk. What are your intentions with my sister? Madison groaned. Ty, this isn't the 1800s. I want to be sure he's serious, Tyler said stubbornly. Alexander's expression grew earnest. My intention is to make your sister as happy as she makes me. To support her dreams, respect her independence, and prove every day that I'm worth her trust. Tyler studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. But if you hurt her, billionaire or not, I will end you. Fair enough, Alexander said gravely. The rest of lunch went smoothly, Tyler gradually warming up as they talked about college, Alexander's early startup days, and Madison's dreams of opening her own business. By the time they said goodbye, Tyler pulled Madison aside. I like him. He's weird, but in a good way, and he looks at you like you hung the moon. Madison's heart swelled. Yeah? Yeah, just be careful, okay? I don't want to see you get hurt. I will, Madison promised, hugging him tight. That night, Alexander took Madison to his penthouse for the first time. She'd been curious about where he actually lived, beyond the temporary apartment. The space was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, sleek modern furniture, an open kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. But what caught Madison's attention were the personal touches. A framed photo of Alexander with Emily, both of them laughing. A battered guitar in the corner. Bookshelves crammed with everything from business theory to science fiction novels. This is you, Madison said, running her fingers along the spines. The real you. The real me is standing right next to you, Alexander said, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. They cooked dinner together, pasta that Madison definitely burned, but Alexander ate without complaint. They danced in the living room to music playing from Alexander's phone, Madison's head resting on his chest. I could get used to this, she admitted softly. Good, Alexander murmured into her hair, because I'm not letting you go. Later, curled up on his couch with the city lights glittering below, Madison felt a contentment she'd never experienced before. This wasn't the life she'd imagined, dating a billionaire, navigating high society events, having her picture splashed across gossip sites. But somehow, it felt right. What are you thinking? Alexander asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. That this is the weirdest, most wonderful thing that's ever happened to me, Madison said honestly. Finding you, falling for you, all of it. Same, Alexander said quietly. You crashed into my carefully controlled life and turned everything upside down. Best disaster I've ever experienced. Madison laughed, tilting her head to kiss him. Here's to disasters, then. To disasters, Alexander agreed, smiling against her lips. But their peaceful moment was short-lived. The next morning, Madison woke to her phone ringing incessantly. She fumbled for it, squinting at the screen. Claire's name flashed. Hello? Madison mumbled, still half asleep. Madison, don't freak out, but there's a news article about your family. Madison sat bolt upright. What? Someone dug into your background. There's a piece about your mom's medical bills, your brother's scholarship, your financial situation. It's not terrible, but it's invasive. They're painting a picture. Madison's blood ran cold. She quickly opened her browser, and there it was. Cinderella story or calculated move? Inside Madison Hayes' humble beginnings. The article detailed her family's financial struggles, her mother's illness, Tyler's scholarship, Madison's multiple jobs. It wasn't cruel, but it was deeply personal, stripping away privacy she'd never agreed to give up. Alexander woke beside her, immediately noticing her distress. What's wrong? She handed him the phone silently. His face darkened as he read. I'm going to find out who leaked this, and it doesn't matter. Madison interrupted, though her voice shook. This is my life now, isn't it? Everything exposed, analyzed, picked apart. Madison, I need air, she said, standing abruptly. She grabbed her jacket and headed for the door. Alexander followed, catching her arm gently. Please don't shut me out. I'm not, Madison said, though tears threatened. I just need to think. She left the penthouse and walked aimlessly through the city, her mind spinning. This wasn't sustainable. The constant scrutiny, the invasions of privacy, the feeling of being constantly judged. Was loving Alexander worth this? Her phone buzzed. Alexander, I'm not going to chase you, but I'm here when you're ready to talk. I love you. Madison stared at the message, tears finally spilling over. She loved him too. God, she loved him so much. But was love enough? Madison spent the next 2 days in a haze of doubt. She went through the motions, delivering food, attending classes, but her heart wasn't in it. Alexander gave her space, though he sent gentle messages reminding her he was there whenever she needed. Claire, her roommate, finally cornered her on the 3rd day. Okay, enough moping. Talk to me. Madison sighed, setting down the textbook she'd been staring at without reading. I don't know if I can do this, Claire. The media, the scrutiny, people digging into my family. It's too much. So you're going to walk away from the guy you're in love with? Maybe it's better for both of us. Claire snorted. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and I once watched you eat a week-old burrito. That was one time. Madison, listen. You're scared. I get it. But are you really going to let fear make your decisions? You who pedals through storms to deliver food. You who's working 3 jobs to pay for school. You're the bravest person I know. Loving Alexander doesn't feel brave, Madison admitted. It feels terrifying. Good love is always terrifying, Claire said. It means you have something real to lose. But Madison, that man is crazy about you. I've seen the way he looks at you, like you're the only person in the room. Madison swallowed hard. What if I'm not enough for his world? Then his world needs to adjust, Claire said firmly. You are enough, Madison. You've always been enough. Her words broke something loose in Madison's chest. She grabbed her phone and texted Alexander. Can we meet? Tonight? His response was immediate. Anywhere. Anytime. They met at the park where they'd had one of their early dates, sitting on their favorite bench overlooking the pond. Alexander looked like he hadn't slept. Worry etched into his features. I'm sorry, Madison said immediately, for running away, for shutting you out. You have nothing to apologize for, Alexander said, taking her hand. What happened was a violation of your privacy. You had every right to be upset. I was upset, Madison admitted. But I was also scared. Scared that I can't handle your world, that I'll always be the delivery driver who doesn't belong. Alexander turned to face her fully. Madison, I need you to hear this. You do belong. Not because you've changed yourself to fit, but because you're exactly who you are. The woman who refused tips because she thought I needed them more. The woman who challenges me and makes me laugh and reminds me why I started building Kane Enterprises in the first place. To make a difference, not just to accumulate wealth. He cupped her face gently. You make me a better person, Madison Hayes. And if the world can't see that, then the world is blind. Tears streamed down Madison's face. I love you. God, I love you so much. But I'm still scared. Then let's be scared together, Alexander said. Let's face whatever comes next as a team. Because I'm not doing this without you. I don't want to. Madison laughed through her tears. Even though I'm a disaster who burns pasta? Especially because you're a disaster who burns pasta, Alexander said, smiling. You keep me grounded. You remind me what actually matters. She kissed him then, pouring all her fear and love and hope into it. When they pulled apart, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "So, are we doing this? Together?" "Together," Madison confirmed. "One terrifying step at a time." "One terrifying step at a time," Alexander echoed. Over the next few weeks, things began to settle. The media storm died down, moving on to the next celebrity scandal. Alexander's PR team implemented stricter privacy measures. Madison finished her semester with strong grades and even started talking seriously about her business plans with Alexander, who offered advice without overstepping. They fell into a rhythm that felt sustainable. Date nights at Maria's restaurant, quiet evenings in Alexander's penthouse, study sessions where Alexander would work on contracts while Madison tackled assignments. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward moments at high society events, still whispers and judgmental looks. But Madison was learning to hold her head high, to trust that Alexander chose her for a reason. Then, on a random Tuesday, everything changed. Madison was making a delivery when her phone rang. Alexander's assistant, Daniel. "Miss Hayes, you need to get to Kane Enterprises immediately. There's been an incident." Madison's heart dropped. "Is Alexander okay?" "Physically, yes, but it's serious. Please hurry." She abandoned her deliveries, pedaling frantically across town. When she burst into Kane Enterprises, the lobby was chaos. Police officers, security personnel, employees whispering in clusters. Daniel met her at the elevator. "Mr. Kane is in his office. He's been asking for you." Madison ran, her heart pounding. She burst into Alexander's office to find him standing at the window, his posture rigid with tension. "Alex," she breathed. He turned, and the relief on his face was palpable. He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into a fierce embrace. "What happened?" Madison asked against his chest. Alexander pulled back slightly, his expression grim. "Someone's been embezzling from Kane Enterprises, millions of dollars, funneled through shell companies. My CFO, Richard Sterling, he's been with the company since the beginning. I trusted him completely." "Oh my God," Madison whispered. "And there's more," Alexander continued, his voice tight. "He's trying to frame me. He's planted evidence suggesting I'm behind the embezzlement. If the investigation doesn't clear me, I could lose everything. The company, my reputation, possibly my freedom." Madison felt like the ground had dropped out from under her. "That's insane. You're innocent. I know that. You know that. But proving it's going to be a nightmare. The press will have a field day." He cupped her face, his eyes intense. "Madison, this is going to get ugly. If you want to step back, protect yourself from the fallout, I'll understand. Are you actually suggesting I abandon you?" Madison demanded, pulling away to glare at him. "Now? When you need support more than ever? I don't want to drag you down with me." "Too late," Madison said firmly. "I'm already invested. You said we face things together, remember? That includes this." Alexander's expression crumbled with relief and love. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," Madison agreed. "But you're stuck with me anyway." He laughed shakily, kissing her forehead. "Okay, together then." "Together," Madison confirmed. "Now what do we do?" Alexander took a breath, his CEO mask slipping back into place. "We fight. We clear my name, we expose Richard, and we save the company." "Then let's get started," Madison said, squaring her shoulders. Neither of them knew just how much that fight would cost. But standing together in Alexander's office, facing an uncertain future, they were both certain of one thing. Whatever came next, they'd face it side by side. The next few weeks were the hardest of Madison's life. Alexander was under investigation. The press had latched onto the story like vultures, and Kane Enterprises' stock plummeted. Despite his lawyers working around the clock, the evidence Richard Sterling had fabricated was convincing. Falsified documents, offshore accounts in Alexander's name, payments that seemed to trace directly back to him. Madison watched Alexander shoulder the burden with a stoicism that broke her heart. He barely slept, spending 18-hour days with lawyers and forensic accountants. When he did come home, he collapsed on the couch, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. She did what she could. She brought him meals he forgot to eat, sat with him during late-night strategy sessions, and held him when the weight became too much. But she also felt helpless, watching the man she loved be torn apart by lies. The public opinion was vicious. Half believed Alexander was guilty, a greedy CEO who'd finally been exposed. The other half speculated about Madison's role. Was she complicit? A distraction? A gold digger who'd gotten more than she bargained for? Madison stopped, reading the comments after someone suggested she'd orchestrated the whole thing to extort Alexander. One evening, Emily showed up at Madison's apartment, looking uncharacteristically serious. "Can we talk?" she asked. Madison let her in, offering coffee that Emily waved away. "I want to thank you," Emily said without preamble, "for standing by Alex. A lot of people would have run." "I love him," Madison said simply. "I'm not going anywhere." Emily smiled sadly. "He's lucky to have you. But Madison, I need to warn you. This might get worse before it gets better. Richard Sterling is powerful, well-connected. If Alex goes down, he'll try to take everyone close to him down too, including you. Let him try," Madison said with more confidence than she felt. Emily studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, then we're going to need all the help we can get." What Madison didn't tell Emily was that she'd started her own investigation. Using her journalism background and sheer stubbornness, she'd been digging into Richard Sterling's background, tracking financial patterns, talking to former employees. It was dangerous and probably foolish, but she couldn't just sit by while Alexander's life fell apart. 3 weeks into the investigation, Madison hit a breakthrough. She was scrolling through old financial records late one night when she noticed something odd, a series of small payments, insignificant on their own, but forming a pattern when viewed together. Payments that predated Alexander's supposed involvement by months. Her heart racing, Madison traced the payments back to a series of offshore accounts registered under shell companies. And one of those companies had a director listed, Richard Sterling's brother-in-law. "Got you," Madison whispered. She immediately called Alexander, despite the late hour. He answered on the first ring, his voice rough with sleep. "Madison? What's wrong?" "I found something, evidence that Richard was embezzling long before he claims you were involved. It's not conclusive, but it's a starting point." There was a stunned silence. "Then, Madison, have you been investigating this on your own?" "Maybe. That's dangerous. If Richard finds out, he won't." Madison interrupted. "But Alex, this could help clear your name. Will you at least look at what I found?" He sighed heavily. "Send it to me. And Madison? Please be careful." "Always am." She lied. The next day, Alexander's lawyers reviewed Madison's findings. It was enough to warrant further investigation, and within a week, forensic accountants had traced the pattern back to Richard Sterling definitively. The evidence was damning. Richard had been embezzling for years, using Alexander as a convenient scapegoat when an internal audit got too close. When the truth came out, the fallout was swift. Richard was arrested, charged with embezzlement and fraud. Kane Enterprises stock began to recover. Alexander was cleared of all suspicion. The press that had vilified him now praised his integrity, though Madison noted bitterly that they'd been just as quick to condemn him. The night after Richard's arrest, Alexander came to Madison's apartment. He looked lighter. The crushing weight of the past weeks finally lifted. "You saved me," he said, pulling her into his arms. "You saved yourself," Madison corrected. "I just gave you a nudge in the right direction." "No," Alexander said firmly. "You believed in me when half the world thought I was guilty. You stood by me when it would have been easier to walk away. You're the reason I didn't give up." Madison's eyes filled with tears. "I told you. We're in this together." Alexander knelt down suddenly, and Madison's breath caught. "What are you doing?" "Madison Hayes," he said, looking up at her with those storm-gray eyes she'd fallen in love with. "I should probably wait. Do this somewhere romantic, with candles and music. But I can't. I need you to know, right now, that I want to spend the rest of my life with you." He pulled out a small box, opening it to reveal a simple, elegant ring. "I'm not asking you to fit into my world. I'm asking if I can be part of yours. Will you marry me?" Madison's tears spilled over. "Are you sure? Because I'm still a delivery driver who burns pasta. I'll probably always say the wrong thing at fancy events. Your world is infinitely better with you in it," Alexander interrupted. "So yes, I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything." Madison dropped to her knees, cupping his face. "Yes. God, yes. I'll marry you." He kissed her then, sliding the ring onto her finger, and Madison felt like her heart might burst from sheer joy. "I love you," Alexander whispered against her lips. "I love you too," Madison replied. "Even though you're a billionaire weirdo. And I love you, even though you're a stubborn disaster." They laughed, holding each other on the floor of Madison's tiny apartment, the ring glittering on her finger. Outside, the city hummed with life. But inside that small space, two people who'd found each other against all odds were building something that no amount of wealth or scandal or scrutiny could touch. A love that was messy and real and absolutely, perfectly theirs. The engagement announcement made headlines, of course. But this time, the press was kinder. The narrative had shifted. Madison was no longer the gold digger, but the loyal partner who'd stood by Alexander through his darkest time. "Cinderella gets her prince. Madison Hayes and Alexander Kane announce engagement," read one headline. Madison laughed when she saw it. "I'm not Cinderella," she told Alexander. "Cinderella had a fairy godmother. I had stubbornness and a lot of caffeine." "Much more impressive," Alexander agreed, kissing the top of her head. Planning a wedding while finishing her degree and maintaining her delivery job was chaotic, but Madison refused to quit working. "I earned my degree," she told Alexander. "I'm finishing it." He didn't argue, just supported her through late-night study sessions and early-morning deliveries. Emily, meanwhile, had thrown herself into wedding planning with terrifying enthusiasm. She dragged Madison to dress fittings, florist appointments, and cake tastings until Madison's head spun. "Emily, it's just a wedding," Madison protested after the fifth bakery. "Just a wedding?" Emily looked horrified. "This is my brother's wedding. It has to be perfect." "Define perfect," Madison said warily. Emily's eyes gleamed. "Trust me." Madison wasn't sure she liked the sound of that. But when she tried on dresses and found one that made her feel like herself, simple, elegant, nothing too extravagant, Emily teared up. "You look beautiful," Emily whispered. "Alex is going to lose his mind." Madison stared at her reflection, hardly recognizing the woman looking back. "I can't believe this is really happening." "Believe it," Emily said, squeezing her shoulder. "You're getting your happy ending." But before the happy ending came one last challenge. 2 weeks before the wedding, Madison's mother called. "Madison, we need to talk about this wedding." Madison's stomach sank. "Mom, I just want to make sure you're certain, honey. Marriage to someone like Alexander, it's going to change your life forever. Are you really ready for that?" "I love him, Mom. And he loves me." "I know, sweetie. I just worry about the attention, the expectations, the pressure. I don't want you to lose yourself trying to fit into his world." Madison took a breath. "Mom, I'm not losing myself. I'm choosing a partner who sees me, All of me, and loves me anyway. That's not losing myself. That's finding someone who makes me more myself. There was a long pause. Then her mother's voice, thick with tears. You've grown up so much, Madison. I'm proud of you. Thanks, Mom, Madison whispered. Will you come to the wedding? I wouldn't miss it for the world. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect weather that felt like a blessing. Madison stood in the bridal suite, surrounded by Claire and Emily, staring at her reflection in disbelief. The dress fit perfectly, her hair styled in soft waves, minimal makeup highlighting her natural features. You ready? Claire asked, squeezing her hand. Madison thought about the journey that had brought her here. A rainy night delivery to a broke guy in an empty apartment. Coffee dates and charity galas. Media scandals and embezzlement investigations. Late-night conversations and whispered confessions. Through it all, Alexander had been constant, challenging her, supporting her, loving her exactly as she was. I'm ready, Madison said, smiling. The ceremony was held in the garden of Alexander's family estate, transformed into something magical. White flowers, soft string lights, rows of chairs filled with friends and family. As Madison walked down the aisle on Tyler's arm, her brother beaming with pride, she saw Alexander waiting at the altar. He looked devastating in his tuxedo, but what made her breath catch was his expression. Pure, unguarded love. When Tyler handed her off, Alexander whispered, You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. You're not so bad yourself, Madison whispered back, blinking away happy tears. The officiant began, but Madison barely heard the words. She was too focused on Alexander's hands holding hers, the way his thumb traced gentle circles on her skin, the smile that wouldn't leave his face. When it came time for vows, Alexander spoke first. Madison, when you delivered pizza to my empty apartment and refused my tip, you changed my life. You saw me not as a billionaire or a CEO, but as a person. You challenged me, frustrated me, and made me fall so completely in love with you that I can't imagine my life without you. I promise to always see you as you are, strong, stubborn, brilliant, and kind. I promise to support your dreams, to stand by you through every challenge, and to never stop trying to make you laugh. You are my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life. Madison was crying before he finished. She took a shaky breath for her own vows. Alexander, I delivered a lot of pizzas before I met you. But you were the first customer who saw me as more than just a delivery driver. You made me believe I was worthy of love, of success, of everything I'd been too scared to dream about. You've shown me a world I never imagined, but more than that, you've shown me what it means to be truly seen. I promise to always tell you when you're being ridiculous, to never let you work too late without feeding you, and to love you with everything I am. You're my unexpected adventure, and I can't wait to see where we go next. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. The officiant smiled. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Alexander, you may kiss your bride. Alexander didn't hesitate, pulling Madison into a kiss that was tender and passionate and full of promise. The guests erupted in applause and cheers. As they walked back down the aisle hand in hand, Madison caught Tyler's eye. He was grinning like an idiot, giving her a thumbs up. Emily was openly sobbing. Claire was wolf whistling. The reception was held under a massive tent, decorated with twinkling lights and flowers. The food was catered by Maria's restaurant, of course, and Maria herself had come, tears streaming down her face as she hugged them both. My boy, she kept saying to Alexander, you finally found a good one. During their first dance, Alexander held Madison close, swaying to a soft melody. How does it feel to be Mrs. Kane? He murmured against her ear. Like the most wonderful mistake I've ever made, Madison replied, smiling up at him. Mistake? A happy mistake, she clarified. I wasn't looking for love that night. I was just trying to deliver a pizza. Best delivery of my life, Alexander said, spinning her gently. Later, after cutting the cake and toasting with champagne, Madison found herself on the terrace, staring out at the gardens. Tyler appeared beside her. Happy? He asked. Deliriously, Madison admitted. I keep waiting to wake up. It's real, sis. You earned this. Madison hugged him tightly. Thanks for always believing in me, Ty. Always, he promised. As the night wore on, Madison danced with everyone. Tyler, Emily, Daniel, even Maria, who was surprisingly light on her feet. But it was when she and Alexander snuck away from the party, stealing a moment alone under the stars, that she felt truly content. Thank you, Alexander said quietly. For what? For refusing that first tip. For giving me a chance. For loving me even when my world fell apart. For everything. Madison cupped his face. You don't have to thank me for loving you, Alexander. It's the easiest thing I've ever done. He kissed her softly, the sounds of the celebration fading into background noise. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with you. Even when I burn dinner? Especially when you burn dinner, Alexander said, laughing. They stayed there for a while, wrapped in each other's arms, looking at the stars. Two people from completely different worlds who'd somehow found their way to each other. It wasn't a fairy tale. There would still be challenges ahead, disagreements and obstacles and moments of doubt. But they'd face them together, one step at a time. And that, Madison thought, was better than any fairy tale ending. The honeymoon was a simple affair by Billionaire standards, a week at a secluded beach house, just the two of them, with no media, no obligations, no distractions. Madison had never felt more at peace. They spent their days exploring tide pools, cooking meals together that were sometimes successful and sometimes disastrous, and their nights wrapped in each other's arms, talking about everything and nothing. If you could do anything in the world, Alexander asked one evening as they watched the sunset from the porch, what would it be? Madison thought about it. I want to start my business, a logistics company, but one that focuses on fair wages and worker rights. Too many delivery drivers are exploited. I want to change that. Alexander smiled. Let's do it then. Alex, starting a business costs money I don't have, but I do, he pointed out. And before you get all stubborn about accepting help, consider this. I'd be your investor, not your benefactor. You'd maintain control, make all decisions. I'd just provide capital and business advice. Madison bit her lip, tempted but wary. I don't want people thinking I succeeded because of you. Then we'll prove them wrong, Alexander said simply. Build something so good, so ethical, that your name speaks for itself. I believe you can do it, Madison. I've always believed you could do anything you set your mind to. Tears pricked her eyes. You're really okay with your wife being a CEO? I'm thrilled my wife is going to be a CEO, Alexander corrected. Power couple status achieved. Madison laughed, launching herself at him. They tumbled onto the porch swing, laughing and kissing until the sun dipped below the horizon. Back in the city after their honeymoon, reality set in quickly. Madison finished her final semester, graduating with honors. Alexander threw her a celebration party that was warm and intimate, attended by everyone who mattered, Tyler, her mom, Emily, Claire, Maria, Daniel, and even some of her fellow delivery drivers who'd become friends. Speech, Tyler called out, grinning. Madison stood, glass of champagne in hand, looking around at the faces of people she loved. I'm not good at speeches, she began, but I want to say thank you to my family, who never stopped supporting me, to my friends, who kept me sane, and to my husband, she smiled at Alexander, who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. This degree represents years of late nights and hard work, but it also represents possibility, and I can't wait to see what comes next. The room erupted in applause and cheers. After graduation, Madison threw herself into building her company. She named it Hayes Logistics, and with Alexander's investment and mentorship, she began assembling a team. The first employees she hired were delivery drivers she'd worked alongside, people who understood the struggles and deserved better opportunities. It was hard work. Madison spent long hours drafting business plans, meeting with potential clients, and establishing ethical supply chains. There were setbacks, lost contracts, financial crunches, competitors who dismissed her as a billionaire's pet project. But Madison was relentless. She proved herself with every successful delivery, every fair wage paid, every driver who told her this was the first job where they felt valued. 6 months after launch, Hayes Logistics landed a major contract with a national retailer, and Madison's company became profitable. The press covered it, but this time the narrative was about Madison's business acumen, not her marriage. "How does it feel?" Alexander asked one evening as they celebrated at Maria's restaurant. "Surreal," Madison admitted. "Sometimes I still feel like that delivery driver on a bike, just trying to make rent." "You'll always be that delivery driver," Alexander said. "That's what makes you a great CEO. You never forget where you came from." Madison reached across the table, taking his hand. "Thank you for believing in me." "Always," he said simply. Their life settled into a rhythm. Madison ran Hayes Logistics while Alexander continued growing Kane Enterprises. They bought a house together, not a mansion, but a comfortable home with space for both their offices and a ridiculous kitchen Madison promised to learn how to use properly. Emily became a frequent visitor, often showing up unannounced with wine and gossip. Tyler finished college and accepted a job at a tech startup, making Madison absurdly proud. Her mother's health improved, and Madison finally convinced her to retire, using company profits to ensure she was comfortable. "You didn't have to do this," her mother said tearfully when Madison explained. "Yes, I did," Madison replied. "You sacrificed so much for Tyler and me. Let me take care of you now." There were challenges, of course. Running 2 companies meant long hours and sometimes conflicting schedules. There were arguments about work-life balance, about whose meeting was more important, about whose turn it was to cook dinner even though they both knew it would probably be takeout. But they navigated it together, learning to communicate, to compromise, to support each other's ambitions while nurturing their relationship. One evening, 2 years into their marriage, Madison came home to find Alexander on the couch, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately, dropping her bag. "Nothing's wrong," he said quickly. "I just wanted to talk about something. About us, about our future." Madison's heart skipped. "Okay," Alexander took her hand. "We've built incredible careers. We have a beautiful home, amazing friends and family. But I've been thinking about what's next for us, and I want to know how you feel about starting a family." Madison blinked, surprised. "Kids?" "Only if you want them," Alexander said quickly. "I know your company is still growing, and I don't want to pressure you, but I'd love to have children with you someday. When you're ready." Madison sat back, processing. She'd been so focused on building her business, proving herself, that she hadn't thought much about kids. But now, imagining a little version of Alexander or herself or some perfect combination of them both, "I think I'd like that," she said slowly. "Maybe not right away, but someday. When Hayes Logistics is more established." Alexander's face broke into a relieved smile. "Someday works for me. We have all the time in the world." Madison kissed him softly. "We really do, don't we?" "We really do," he agreed. As they sat together on the couch, talking about hypothetical future children, how many, what they'd name them, who would handle midnight feedings, Madison felt a profound sense of gratitude. Her life had taken turns she never expected, A random pizza delivery had led to love, marriage, entrepreneurship, and now dreams of a family. It wasn't the life she'd planned. It was so much better. Outside, the city lights twinkled against the dark sky. Inside, two people who'd built something real and lasting continued planning their future, one conversation at a time. And Madison knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever came next, they'd face it the way they'd faced everything else. Together, 5 years into their marriage, Madison stood in the boardroom of Hayes Logistics, looking out at her team of 50 employees, feeling equal parts pride and disbelief. Her company had grown beyond her wildest dreams, with offices in 3 cities and contracts with major retailers across the country. But what mattered most was that every driver, every warehouse worker, every dispatcher earned a fair wage and had access to benefits. She'd built something that mattered. "Boss, you ready?" Her COO, Marcus, a former delivery driver she'd promoted, asked. Madison nodded, turning to face the room. "Let's do this." The presentation went smoothly, her team pitching a new sustainable delivery initiative that would reduce emissions while maintaining efficiency. After everyone filed out, Madison sat alone in the boardroom, allowing herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Her phone buzzed. "Alexander." "How'd it go?" "We nailed it," Madison replied, grinning. "Dinner at Maria's to celebrate?" "Always." That evening, at their favorite table in the small Italian restaurant that had become their second home, Maria fussed over them as always, bringing plates of pasta and stories about her grandchildren. "You two still look at each other like newlyweds," Maria said, pinching both their cheeks. "What's your secret?" Madison and Alexander exchanged a glance. "We never forget where we started," Madison said. "And we never take each other for granted," Alexander added. Maria nodded approvingly. "Good. You keep doing that." After Maria swept away, Alexander reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "What's this?" Madison asked, curious. "Open it." Inside was a single photograph, the first picture of them together, taken by a friend at one of their early dates. Madison was mid-laugh, Alexander looking at her with undisguised adoration. "I found it in an old box," Alexander explained. "Thought you'd want to see where we started." Madison traced the edge of the photo, her heart full. "We were so young, so hopeful and terrified." "Still hopeful," Alexander said, maybe less terrified. "Speak for yourself," Madison teased. "I'm still terrified you'll realize I can't cook, and I'm still terrified you'll realize I'm a weirdo who orders too much takeout." They laughed, the comfortable sound of two people who knew each other inside and out. Later, walking home through the city streets hand in hand, they passed a delivery cyclist pedaling through the rain. Madison stopped, watching the figure disappear into the night. "That used to be me," she murmured. "And now you're creating better conditions for people like them," Alexander reminded her. "That's not small, Madison. That's everything." She leaned into his side, grateful for his constant support. When they reached their house, Madison paused on the front steps, looking up at the warm lights glowing from within. "You know what's funny?" she said. "What? That night I delivered pizza to your empty apartment, I never imagined this. Any of this." Alexander wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Neither did I, but I'm glad you refused that tip." "Me too," Madison admitted. "Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Alexander corrected. "First was saying yes when I proposed." Madison turned in his arms, smiling up at him. "You're right. That was the best decision." They kissed under the porch light, the city humming around them, and Madison thought about the unlikely journey that had brought them here. She'd been a struggling delivery driver with big dreams and bigger doubts. He'd been a lonely billionaire looking for something real. Together, they'd built a life that was messy and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. "I love you," Madison whispered. "I love you too." Alexander replied, "even though you burned dinner last night." "It was only a little burned," Madison protested, laughing. "It was completely charred. Details." They went inside, closing the door on the world outside, and Madison felt the same contentment she'd felt on their wedding day. This was home. Not the house, but the person beside her. The partnership they'd forged. The life they'd built together. One stubborn, loving step at a time. Years later, when people asked Madison about her success story, she never talked about business strategies or market disruptions. Instead, she told them about a rainy night, a pizza delivery, and a broke-looking guy who turned out to be a billionaire. But more than that, she talked about kindness. About refusing a tip because someone looked like they needed it more. About how a small act of compassion had led to the greatest love of her life. Never underestimate the power of seeing people, she'd say. Really seeing them. Beyond their circumstances or appearances. You never know what doors that simple act of humanity might open. And Alexander, listening to her speak at conferences or interviews, would smile that same smile he'd given her on their first night. Full of wonder and love and gratitude. Because Madison had seen him, not the billionaire, not the CEO, but the man beneath it all. And in seeing him, she'd changed everything. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. There had been no glass slippers or fairy godmothers. Just two imperfect people who'd found each other against impossible odds and decided to fight for something real. That was the real happy ending. Not perfection, but partnership. Not wealth, but worth. Not a fantasy, but a choice. To love, to trust, to build something beautiful together. And as Madison and Alexander navigated their life side by side, they knew one truth with absolute certainty. Some deliveries bring pizza, others bring love that lasts a lifetime. And the best ones? They bring both. What did you think of their story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what's your rating? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Check out more heartwarming tales by clicking the videos on your screen. Thanks for watching.